So if you're learning AI agents or even building one in 2026, there are few core topics you cannot skip. APIs and MCP are one of those. Because without these two, agents cannot be called agents, right? Because they will not take any actions, they won't do anything, they just become chatbots. So today, the plan is I want to explain the clear difference between these two with practical examples and of course a live demo. And I've built like three agents and I've given them the same task, right? The first agent will basically use an API and to solve that task. The second one will use MCP to solve that task. And the third one will use both MCP and API. So not only you will understand the difference, but you will also understand which one of these combinations or which one of these will actually make the overall system much more efficient. And I, of course, used the Google's agent development kit in order to build this, which is one of my favorite ways to build agent. Okay. Now, another common point of confusion, isn't MCP just an API with extra steps? Now, there is some truth to it because underneath the MCP, APIs are still doing all the work. But the main difference is this, right? With a pure play API, you can think of it as a human kind of reads the manual and wires every connection programmatically. Think of it like hard coded. With MCP, the agent can walk up to a system and ask, hey, what can you do for me? And the system will answer on its own. So that's like the fundamental difference. All right, so here's the plan for today. First, you will understand what an API actually is properly, plus the few types you will actually run into out there. Then MCP, right? The same way I'll explain what it is really, how it works. And finally, you will also see how you can use both of them together. Okay. And at the end, what you will get is like a decision card or a decision tree that you can use to always go to whenever you're making the decision, right? When to use API versus MCP. Okay. So before we go there, a quick disclaimer, all opinions are my own and do not belong to my employer. All right. So with that, let's get into it. Okay, so in order to understand the difference between API and MCP very clearly, I think a cool way to do that would be see visually how an agent behaves when one is being called versus the other, right? So here, what I've done is I've created three different agents. Agent one is going to be calling the API. Agent two is going to be calling MCP. And then agent three is going to be calling a hybrid, right? And I'm going to almost ask the same questions, basically giving the same task. Now, I built this agents on the ADK framework and I used anti-gravity to spin this up for me. And you can see here, this is the code. So you can see that this is the agent with the API. This is the agent with hybrid. This is the agent with MCP. And you can see the whether API and whether MCP and all of those things, which I have added as well, right? So that's the idea. So I'm going to keep it at an abstract level because I don't want to do a walkthrough of the code with you, but it's more important for me to explain the concept. Okay. So what we're going to do here is ask the first question. Now, I would love for you to pay attention to this. And you also see here, you will see the workflow and the workflow would differ. And that's the idea for each one of this. And you can also see like how ADK is going to respond back, right? So you will also get to understand how agent development kit behaves and responds based on the tool call. And this is like a high level how the code changes, right? So I'll try to give you a higher level explanation of each one of this, okay? So with that, let me just ask the first question. So let's say that I'm asking the agent, what is the current weather in Austin? So number one, it is now figuring out, okay, which is the tool that I need to execute. And in this case, it is going to be using the tool, which is a weather API, right? So you can see that this is how ADK has handled this. And this is a tool that, that I've written, right? So you can see that this is the model, and then there's just one tool, which is get weather, current weather function. And within the function, there is this particular API call, which has been made, right? So that's the idea for this particular agent. And similarly, you can have any questions. In this case, if I'm asking like, what is the price of, let's say, NVIDIA or whatever, right? So it will do the same thing, but in this case, it will call the finance API, right? That's the idea. So you're making a simple call to an API. Now, let me just go a little bit deeper on what exactly is an API. So an API is basically a door with rules. One program knocks, asks it in a very specific format, and gets back a very specific answer. That's it. That's an API. It's come in a few flavors that you will run into. Think about REST, which is the everyday standard. Most of the web runs on it. Then we have GraphQL, where you ask for exactly the fields you want. And then webhooks, right, where the system calls you when something happens, right, based on triggers. And the API that you saw in my demo is actually built with FastAPI. Now, FastAPI is not a type of API. It's the most popular way to build APIs in Python. You basically write a normal Python function, and you put one decorator on top, and boom, that function is now a live API endpoint. So APIs are perfect when a human developer is doing the wiring. But if you think about this, the problem is the agent in this scenario will only know one trick. Every new capability is more code that needs to be written and needs to be tested and needs to be maintained forever. So now imagine that doing at a company at scale, right? Let's say that you want to have 5 different questions or different types of systems to be connected. That is basically 5 different integrations. And then within that, if there are different questions that needed to be asked, those could mean different tools, right? This is generally not going to be easy when it comes to the agentic AI workflow. And that's where MCP comes in, right? So let's see what happens. So I'm going to ask the same question, whether in Austin, and you would see here, the first question that it asks is, what can you do? And then it says that, hey, like the server has 3 different tools over here, right? So I can give you the current weather. I can also give you the forecast, and I can also give you the air quality. And now, because of our question was on weather, it basically pointed to that particular tool of the MCP server, right? So it was able to get to that answer. Now, if you look at the code, you will see something very interesting. Here, you will see that we just use the MCP tool set. So between these 4 lines of code, you are able to provide multiple tools, right? In this case, 3 different tools, not just one. So the server owns the tools. My agent, which is the ATK agent, just discovers them and uses this. Okay, so let me make it a little bit more interesting, right? Let's say that I want to ask this question: compare today's weather in Austin versus tomorrow. So again, the agent discovers that the server has these 3 different tools, and now it will be able to call both of this together. So current weather and the forecast. So it's calling them one after the other. Nobody told that this is a sequence that it needs to follow. It planned everything itself. So that is the large language model doing the bonus. And of course, I can also ask air quality in Austin. And in this case, it will automatically figure out which particular tool to call, right? So this is the magic of MCP, right? You build the server or the door once, and then you're able to keep on adding multiple tools, and the agents will be able to discover this, right? Okay, so now let's talk about MCP properly, the Model Context Protocol. Here is the whole idea in one line. Instead of a human reading the documentation and wiring every connection by hand, the agent connects to a system and asks one question: what can you do? And the system answers by itself in a standard format that every AI model understands. That's it. The system describes its own tools, what they're called, what they need, what they return, and the agent discovers them at runtime. Nobody writes the integration code. The server owns the tools. The agent just discovers them and uses them. And here's what makes this really interesting and powerful. That server is actually not glued to one agent. It's not even glued to one AI company. The same MCP server plugs into Gemini, into Claude, into ChatGPT, into anything that speaks the protocol. You build the door once and every agent can knock. And this is why the whole industry backed. In December, MCP was handed over to the Linux Foundation, and Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, all companies signed on it, right? Okay, so now that we have seen the MCP, I want to explain the third scenario. So in this case, I have the weather MCP connected to the agent and also Places API, which is directly the Google Maps API. So let's say that recommend a park in Austin. So what you would see over here is it is actually like now drawing a map over here live. And this is basically the combination of MCP being called as well as, so depending on the weather in Austin, it is actually like telling me which particular parks to go, right? So you can see that it is giving me that, okay, this is a good park, Peace District Park. So it has checked the weather and has also suggested the right kind of park where it will be sunny and a perfect day to enjoy, right? So what is happening here is this is a combination of weather MCP and Places API from Google Maps, right? So the idea is when you have more dedicated kind of APIs, then you could probably use that as well to get very precise answers and then combine them with the MCP as well, right? So I just wanted to make sure you also understand the combination of both MCP and API has a place in different scenarios. And in this one specifically, where we're calling the Maps API, you can see that is a scenario that we're running. That's how real production agents are actually built. So when someone at work asks you API or MCP, now you know. Thank you for your time. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.